Hey everyone, the fly I'm going to be tying for you today is my Jack Daniels. This is a bug I came up with last year and I've had tons of success ever since I started using it. I wanted to add another bug to my box that was really no frills, a generic bug that could represent mayflies or caddis, maybe even a small stonefly. And I find myself using this bug anytime I encounter clear water, sunny days, maybe I'm fishing a stream that sees a lot of pressure, and I really like bugs that don't have a lot of flash or big hot spots for situations like that. And this bug really fits that bill. So let's put a hook in the vise for you. You'll see it's actually a fun tie, and at the end of the video, I'm gonna tell you how I came up with the name. So the hook I have in the vise is a size 14. This is a copper 2.8 millimeter bead, and it's important that we use copper on this fly. And I'll tie this anywhere from a 16 to a 14. So those are my two sizes I really like for this bug. And I'll vary the weight anywhere from a 2.3 up to a 3.3 millimeter bead, but it's always copper. Now the thread is really important on this fly. So this is gonna be a thread-bodied fly. I like this fly in that kind of dark tan, light brown color range. And once you put UV on top of thread, it darkens it. So I tried a lot of different models around this, tannish brown color. And the one that I came up with that I really like is Danville 60 in beige. So this is the color that really works well with this fly. So let's go ahead and start the thread behind the bead, and don't build a thread dam. We're gonna show you how we finish this fly at the end here. So for the tailing fiber, I'm using Coke de Leon. This is a Flor de Escoba, which is really a brown mottled color. Now you can use a dark Pardo as well, that certainly works, but I happen to like this color for the tailing fiber. So pull about 3 or 4 fibers off. Just make sure those tips are lined up. We'll go ahead and set it on top of the hook here. Just spin that thread counterclockwise, and what happens is it jumps backwards and it'll grab the thread, and then when you make a wrap, the torque kind of pulls it to the top and it centers it. So I like the tail to be about a hook shank in length, maybe slightly shorter. So you saw what I did there. When I let go of the bobbin, always take your hook and spin it away from you towards the camera, because once you let go of the bobbin, you don't want the thread to nick that hook point, because it gets really frustrating when the thread gets frayed. So just for a moment, I want to talk about consistency. So you can tie this bug, or any bug for that matter, the same way every single time, just as long as we control these thread wraps. So I'm gonna show you how I do this, and if you do it every single time with this bug, they're always gonna look exactly the same. So let's spin that thread counterclockwise. It flattens it. Now with flat thread, let's go up the hook shank, touching wraps, and we're gonna stop about 2 wraps before the bead. Go ahead and cut that excess off. And that's important, because what we're gonna do here is we're gonna have a little cave behind that bead, and we're gonna fill that in with dubbing and CDC hackle. So just go ahead and stop that maybe 2 turns from the bead, spin that thread counterclockwise to flatten it, and then take it down with touching wraps. And then we're gonna stop about 3/4 of the way down. You can see it's right there at the hook point. Spin that thread again and take it back up. And once again, this is how you make every fly consistent and exactly the same. Stop it in that same place, spin it counterclockwise, go back down, stop it halfway, spin it, go back up. Spin it again. Now we're gonna take it all the way back down. Now this is a very thin body, and that's what you want in this fly. Now, if you do what I did, every single time, every one of your flies is gonna look exactly the same. So for the next step, we're gonna rib this fly with this thread. So I'm taking a black marker. You can use a black Sharpie. And just go ahead and just color it. Now you can see that beige thread right there. So just make a wrap around until you get the black right at the end there. Now we wanna spin it clockwise. So when you spin the thread clockwise, it cords it up. Actually, there. So spin it clockwise. Now we're just gonna wrap it forward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I usually do about 5. Now, just do 2 whip finishes, 1, 2. And we're gonna cut this thread off. For the next step, we're just gonna take our UV resin. This is UV Craft, but you can use whatever UV that you like. And what I do is I just put a little bit on a bobbin, and I like a very thin coat here. So we're just gonna just paint it on there. And you can see that's a real thin coat there. We'll just go ahead and zap it. Now you can see the bead right here. It's nice and loose there, and we have that little bit of a cave there. Now, I like that. We're gonna fill that in. We're gonna make a dubbing loop here in a second. The reason I like this is when we wrap our dubbing loop with our CDC in it, it's gonna make it flare out. So it gives it a really nice look. So for the next step, I replaced the thread, and I like using a GSP. This is Semperfli. It's in brown, and color doesn't really matter because we're gonna hide it at the end, but this is a 30 denier. So just go ahead and just put it behind the bead here. And you can see, you can really tug on that GSP, and that's why I like it so much, because what it'll do is when we finish this fly off, it's gonna slip behind the bead right here, and it gives it a really nice finished look, and it doesn't you don't overwhelm the fly with a bunch of whip finishes at the end. So just go ahead and make a dubbing loop. So we're just gonna double that thread, make a loop. Go ahead and set that on the cradle. We're gonna take our dubbing spinner, and I just set it in there and leave it there for a second. For the next step, we're gonna take, this is Hen's Spectra dubbing in black. This is a nice subtle flash. That's what I like about it. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna take just enough out, and we're gonna put about 3/4 of an inch. So we're gonna make a really thin dubbing noodle, I should say, on one side of the loop here. Now I got a little too much, so we're just gonna trim a little off. So we're putting a thin dubbing noodle on here. It's about 3/4 of an inch long. And what I do is on my CDC clip, I make markings on it. So I measure it just to double check to make sure it's the right length. And after you tie a bunch, you'll always, just by doing it so often, you'll know when you got the right amount. But it's always good to check. And once again, this is 3/4 of an inch, every time use 3/4 of an inch, and every single fly will look the same. So for the next step, we're gonna take I like dark gray khaki color. You can also use a dark brown. This is from Swiss CDC. Whatever model or maker you use, doesn't really matter, but I like it in that dark khaki, dark brown color. So this is really important. So I take a feather, and we're not gonna over hackle this fly, because we don't wanna overwhelm it with CDC, because we want just enough on it to have movement but not impede the sink rate. So the more CDC you put on, actually the less movement you get, and it actually slows the descent. So we want to make sure this fly sinks fairly quickly. So we're going to put about 1/2 inch of CDC on here. And once again, I have markings on this so I know whether or not it's the right length, or the right amount, I should say. So we're just going to stick one side in there. We trim it off. And that's about 1/2 inch. We're just going to stick it in here. And I'm just going to pull it because I want them just to get the ends kind of towards the edge there. And we're just going to go ahead and spin this up. And you can see there's not a lot of CDC on there, which is exactly what we want. Now, we're just going to go ahead and wrap this. We're going to start from the rear of that kind of valley we made, and then we're going to put one wrap in front of the other, and at the same time we're going to preen this back. And just slowly take your time and make sure that the CDC is going backwards, because it's real easy if you start rushing it that it will kind of get bundled up, and you don't want to do that. Go ahead and crank down on that. You can see it'll clean up nicely here in a minute. So go ahead and wrap twice over it, twice in front of it, and you've locked it in. Cut the excess off here. Now, what I like about this GSP is we can slip it right behind that bead and get a really nice, clean, finished look. So I take some fly tie or cement, or you can use super glue. Doesn't really matter. And I'll just put a little on the thread here. And we can just go ahead and 1, 2, 3. You can actually feel it slipping in behind that bead. Just pull it tight, cut it off, and that is not going anywhere. So we just do just a little trim job on these. I do like them longer, but you can see how it flares out there because you made that little cave. And this is just a fabulous bug. I catch a ton of trout on this, and it has great sink rate. It has great movement because we haven't over hackled it, and it is just a fish catcher right there. So let me tell you how I came up with the name Jack Daniels. So last year in October, I was fishing the Little J in central Pennsylvania, and I had fished this bug all year and I didn't have a name for it. And during that video, I was catching a lot of fish, and I kept referring to the bug as the no-name bug. And I ended up catching a 21-incher on that video. And at the end of the day, all my buddies and I were hanging out, and I told them I caught that 21-incher and on the no-name bug. And one of my friends, shout out to you, Swiggy, he said that I needed to name it, and I should name it after a whiskey. And for those of you that don't know, Dominic Swintoski with Troutbitten, he refers to any trout over 20 inches as a whiskey. So we thought it was pretty fitting that we could name this bug the Jack Daniels. So that's how I came up with it. I'm not going to guarantee you a whiskey, but I will guarantee you if you put a row of these in your box, you're definitely going to catch some fish. I mean, this thing has earned its way into my box. It has a really significant place in my box, and I use it often, and it is a great confidence fly of mine. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd appreciate if you give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Happy to help you out. And as always, tight lines, everybody. I'll talk to you later.